let's go to some other news today. And of course, all that concern about negative gearing and the rebuke today from Jim Chalmers. Who can trust Labor after last week? Let's make some sense, or try and make some sense of all of this. Our resident number cruncher, Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood joins me now. Well, honestly, Ross, this is the problem when you make truth a casualty. 100 times the PM said he would deliver those stage 3 legislated tax cuts. He wouldn't scrap them until he did scrap them. So how can we believe Jim Chalmers today when he says negative gearing's safe?
Look, that's the big issue for the government right now is, given the fact that you can see the modus operandi as to what they've done with both the superannuation changes and then with the tax changes. They've effectively come out and said, oh, it's not really affecting everybody, it's only affecting those people who can really afford it. And we think they're really taking the mickey out of the system anyway. So that was where it came with doubling the taxes on people with more than $3 million in their super fund. Then when it came to stage 3 tax cuts, which were committed, they were confirmed, they were not being changed, and this was a consistent pattern from the government, from the Prime Minister, from the Treasurer, and effectively it came out, well, actually what we've done, we've found a better way. We're basically going to still give them a tax cut, but that money, the money for the high end, we're going to give to everybody else. It literally is a way of being able to try and buy the support of 11 million people while losing the support for most people, 1 million people you probably didn't have the support to. So to your point, if you come to negative gearing, you sit there and say, well, people with, 5 houses negatively geared? Is it maybe $5 million, $10 million? What's a number? Pick a number where you suddenly think beyond that somebody could be taking advantage of the system. Well, then you sit there and say, well, maybe you limit the benefits for that person. Maybe you start to bring it in. We know it's Labor Party policy. They took it to election. They lost that election. Now, of course, they want to run away from even the threat of that happening again. But do bear in mind this is also a government that said it wants to build 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years or so. And to do that, they need every incentive on the table to be able to get those homes built. And that includes not giving a disincentive for investors in particular to walk away. Because if they do, they will not hit that target. Rents will be higher for ordinary Australians, and so too will the price of properties. So getting your kids into a home in the future will be even more difficult if they do contemplate any change here for some social justice reason.
All right, we will watch this one closely. What did you make of the announcement today that former Labor Climate Change Minister, Union heavyweight Greg Combet, is going to be the new boss of the $200 billion future fund? Jim Chalmers says, yes, it's independent, yes, it's got commercial objectives, but we know that the pressure from the unions on industry super to fund and invest in a whole lot of green claptrap is very, very strong, all the gender rules and diversity rules and everything else. My fear is that the future fund will head the same way under Combet.
Well, just consider right now that industry super funds in Australia, which are broadly union dominated. Now, under those circumstances, Australia has more than $3 trillion, $3.3 trillion in superannuation right now. It's dominated by industry superannuation funds that came about as part of, sort of enterprise bargaining agreements. Now what you've got is another $212 billion that comes under the control of basically left-leaning, sort of, if you like, Labor Party sort of officials. Now, the whole point about your point is, whose money is this? Well, in the case of the Future Fund, remember that came from surpluses in the sale of Telstra to make certain that future government public servants in particular had sufficient money there for their future pensions. That's the reason why it was created. In the case of industry superannuation, it was there to provide for our retirement in the future, but it was our money. And this is the really strange distinction that sometimes governments have about whose money it actually is. Because, of course, when government controls capital, then they have an ability to be able to control not only the people who are appointed to that capital, but also the decisions ultimately that are made about where that capital is deployed. And that's something that every Australian has got to hold their politicians to account for.
And let's not forget, Ross, we saw this in The Voice, when you've got industry super funds who hold a big block of stock inside a public company, they can dictate to that company, the Woolies or the Coles or whomever it might be, look, we want to see you do more on The Voice. It wouldn't be a bad idea to donate to The Voice. I fear the same thing's going to happen because Combe is a warrior. Right? It's not just a former Labor minister. He is a warrior in this job, in the Future Fund. I think that the priorities, investment priorities, they're going to change. We'll watch it closely there as well. Gosh, we've got a work cut out for us. Sorry, Ross, you were about to say?
I was going to say, but also consider the number of former Labor Party heavyweights, one of which is the former Treasurer Wayne Swan, who are now the chairs or running some of our biggest industry super funds. So as I say, when you control the public service, when you start to appoint the judiciary, when you have control of the capital through the superannuation funds, guess what? You've got a pretty significant hold over our economy and the way in which money will be deployed in the future for whatever means that you want it to. But that's the point at which that whole question comes back to every Australian as to whose money is it? Is it the government's? Is this actually some sort of socialised system? Or is it indeed our free will? As we're always told, it's your money, you're going to accumulate it because that's what you're going to live the rest of your days in once you've retired.
Our money, but they want their paws on it, Ross, that's for sure. Thank you for your time.